Welcome to the ABP conference. I'm Professor Alex Forsyth. I'm the chair of the Association for Business Psychology, and it is my great pleasure this morning to introduce Wayne Hemingway MBE, partner of Hemingway Design and Vintage, and he's here to talk to us this morning about purpose and impact. Welcome, Wayne. It's so nice to be able to connect with you today.
Pleasure.
I was hoping that maybe you might start by giving our audience a sense of who you are and your organisation and how you got to where you were, your journey, so to speak.
Yeah, well, I've been in business for 41 years now, and I from Lancashire, moved to London when I was 18 to do a degree, not to do a degree, but did a degree to keep my nan and my mum happy. So got a degree in geography and town planning, but really went to London to live. And the first thing that I did was I set up a band before, straight after, well, while I was doing that, myself and my future wife, we set up a stall on Camden Market selling secondhand clothes. And that was purely to fund our nightclub lifestyle and to be able to buy, dress up, play in a band, go out nightclubbing, all that kind of stuff. And that turned into something pretty big. We became the major proponents of secondhand clothing in the UK. So we were our stall on Camden became 16 stalls. We opened shops, and also in parallel to that, we started the label Red or Dead, which was, we had an avowed intent from the beginning to be the world's first affordable designer label. But we all the way through it, there was purpose. We didn't use that word back then, but both of us from working class backgrounds, kind of disliking the fashion industry for its elitism and having this kind of mission to make designer fashion available to us, but to us and our peers. So there was also that we were very close to Greenpeace and very close to some big movements like that. So at the same time, we were designing all their merchandise. And obviously, when you're involved in that side of things, and the clues in the name, Red or Dead, there was that big political movement, student-led movement about better red than dead, which was a kind of anti-war, anti-nuclear thing going on. So the clue was in the name. And we were just a purposeful label from every single collection that we did at London Fashion. Soon we became Designers of the Year for 3 years on a row. All of this, by the way, without borrowing any money, without ever doing a business plan, and just by employing people who had the right attitude. We never looked at a CV, never looked at qualifications. And bear in mind that we ended up with a 25 million turnover, 23 shops around the world, from Tokyo to Vancouver to a few in the UK. And again, never having a business plan, never borrowing any money, never having an accountant as part of the team, never having a marketing function as part of the team, just doing what we believed was right and building up a following that liked us for our, because you can't be a rubbish designer at the same time, and just have purpose. But because we were half decent designers, well, it must have been more than half decent to win all the awards that we did. But we built up this following, this massive following of young, not just young people, but people who also believed in the values that we believed in, and believe it or not, we reached the scale of that we did without ever doing one single paid for advert. It was all about what our beliefs were that the press started to talk about, and the things that we did on the catwalk, and the store. We did catwalk shows that were all about we're totally anti-nuclear. We did we did shows that were about mental health. We did shows that were the first to use. I remember in the year we did this, we were offered Kate Moss. She was offered to us to be the first for her to, because we were so cool that we were offered Kate Moss in her first catwalk. London Fashion Week catwalk could have been Kate Moss, and we turned her down because under principle she was too young, and that year we were using all non-model models, so people that just off the street of all sizes, and to do that in the 80s was quite ahead of itself. So and then that became when we sold Red or Dead, we'd had enough in 1998, so 20 odd years ago. We sold it. That gave us enough money to kind of do what we wanted in life, and we set up Hemingway Design with a mission that design, which we always stick with today, that design is about improving things that matter in life. So we only take on projects that have societal benefit.
Can I take you back a bit just before we talk about Hemingway Design, just to some of the things that you were talking about there? Clearly passion and purpose driven, but also the confidence to talk about what your values were very openly. I mean, how did you manage to achieve that? Because often people think they know what their values are, but they aren't necessarily vocal enough. And I suppose after COVID, we need brave people to speak out. And I just wondered if you'd any thoughts on that.
Well, I think there's two things. One, I was very lucky to be brought up in a family that, there's no way of describing it other than working class, but who had a proper belief set. And that was a case of, number one, thrift was important because of the lack of money. So there was always this policy of you never waste anything. And at the time, you didn't use that as about the environment and sustainability, but it still became part of me understanding that thing about no waste and looking after what you've got. But my mum always used to say things like, you're only here 70, and therefore, it was my granddad that said, you're only here 70, make the most of it. And I mean, mum used to say things like, our job is here is to leave this world a better place than we found it. And there was those they were earnest, or obviously Hemingway, obviously Ernest and Hemingway go together, but they weren't earnest at all, but they just had a belief set. And then meeting Geraldine, future wife, who, one of, again, working class, one of 5 daughters, living in a 2 up, 2 down, but also with that, growing their own vegetables on an allotment, and Geraldine made it. The reason why we were able to do Red or Dead is because Geraldine made all the clothes for the family, and left school at 15 to work as a wages clerk, to earn money to buy fabric to make clothes for her and her family, and having that background can really, really help. And then when I was 15, punk came along. So 1976, punk came along, and I got into that in a big way, really. And the belief sets of that, it wasn't nihilistic. It was about changing the world for the better, and a lot of the things around that, like the Rock Against Racism movement, was enormous. There's been some good films about that recently, but that 76 to 79, being young, being a teenager then. And the anti-Nazi League and all of that stuff that was going on was really helped. And obviously being in a band, running a nightclub, buying records, going to see bands all the time, there was a political angle. People look back at punk and they show that Bill Grundy, when the Sex Pistols swore on Granada Reports, whatever it was, and they think that it was all about nihilism, but it wasn't. Punk was about change and societal change for the better. Remember, we were in the 70s, the late 70s, of times with rubbish on the streets and strikes everywhere, and then it went into the miners' strike in the early 80s. Well, youth culture was at the heart of all of the change of that, and we're at the heart of youth culture. So it was an exciting time, and those kind of things stick with you.
And do you see a role now for youth culture in the change that we need to affect after COVID?
Well, it is. Youth culture it goes in. It has peaks and troughs of influence with youth culture. But I think at the moment, if you look at the change that's going on with Black Lives Matter and the things that people like Stormzy are doing, in terms of putting young Black people through Oxford and Cambridge, things are happening. It's easy to look back from my age to look at how big punk was, and you think it was only that time, but it isn't. There's always things going on. Sometimes it's more underground, but yes, change. Young people can always make. And if you look at what's going on right now in terms of the shift. Let's look at how, let's look at things that are in the news. If you look at town centres, and the narrative is often, oh, our town centres are, they're in terminal decline. They're not. They're in transition, and they're in transition from a mistake that possibly my age group was mainly to, about thinking that whole thing about shop till you drop, which is pathetic. Town centres should never have been about shopping. That's part of it. It's just one part of it. But a town centre is a place, like the Roman Forum was the first of the kind of real town centres where social interaction, where I met Geraldine in the town centre in a disco. That's town centres are about dancing, they're about meeting people, they're about discourse, they're about eating, they're about all things that are good about being a human being. And a side effect of that is shopping and spending money. But if
so
you
is
look
that the central value now of Hemingway design? Is that what you're about in your new
in urban design? Yeah, we've been working. I wrote an article in The Guardian in 2011 or 2012, which people can go and look it up, and which was "Long live the town centre." The town centre is dead. Long live the town centre. And it's 9 years later. People still think, oh, well, let's blame the internet. The internet's 20%. Has caused about a 20% reduction in retail sales for a lot of shops. But what's really changing is young people saying, what's the point of Debenhams? What's the point of this? What's the point of BHS? What's the point of all these things owned by the likes of Philip Green? What's the point of Topshop when it's owned by somebody who hasn't been thinking? I have to be careful what I say because it's quite libelous. Not really thinking about purpose and the societal direction of travel. So it's young people who are saying, no, let's shop at independence. These big behemoths mean nothing to us. So it's a combination of people of youthful change, and that youthful change comes from the big behemoths not recognizing that change, and also the internet as well. So people will always engender change.
I do remember Vivienne Westwood maybe 15, 20 years ago lamenting the fact that people were dressing exactly the same, and the way in which we shopped was responsible for that, and individuality was being stripped out of society. And maybe to some extent that kind of large shopping centre complex, and we have a huge one in Liverpool, contributed to that. But that was what you did. You pitched up, you wandered around, you bought your things, you drank your coffee, and you went home.
Yeah, sticking with the Liverpool one for a second, at least in Liverpool, you have got a big independent culture that you can reach very close to. You can get to Bold Street, so it's got that balance. But also it's more. We've got to understand that there's three generations now: millennials, Gen Zs, and Gen Alphas, who've grown up with, on the TV screen, David Attenborough, not on the TV screen very often, Greta Thunberg, but and at school learning about sustainability. They hear about disasters in Bangladesh where 1,000 women get killed working in a factory that's in terrible conditions. We hear about the high street chains selling a blouse for £6, and we hear about Boohoo and all that, making stuff in unsuitable conditions in Leicester, and so all of this now is in people's consciousness, is in some people's. I think it's still a bit of a minority sport, but it's growing. It's in people's consciousness, and people are now making purposeful decisions that actually, really, I should buy from that young woman or that young man who I know is making it at home themselves, and I'm willing to pay a few pounds more. It obviously, or look at the growth of the charity sector. Look at the growth of, the charity sector is 7% up in terms, and it's not. And when you delve into that, it's not because people are having to buy charity clothing. It's because the majority of some people, that's obviously some people are, but the majority is people choosing to do that for a purposeful reason. That number one, you're not bringing more more unsustainable fabrics into the system. Number two, you're not having things made by people who under pressure in a country where there's not much regulation. And number three, the money that you spend, in theory, goes to help people, and that. So we're making those choices, and it's showing on the high street.
And what do you think that leaders could and should be doing to make sure that they leverage those kinds of actions in their followers?
Well, leaders have got a choice, haven't they? They've got a choice to. You still can make a lot of money and be not purposeful. Let's be blunt. Let's be blunt about that. You only have to look at some of the housing developers and the profits that they're making. And you can hardly call over the last few years the likes of Persimmon, Barratt's and Wimpey purposeful developers, but they're making some of the largest margins known to business. 20% return on capital employed, which is massive returns. But people have got to realize that that in time all industries will be affected by not being purposeful, and sometimes the volume, the kind of the margins can be sacrificed, because you don't need directors don't need £1 million bonuses every year. You don't know what you do with that kind of money, and there has to come a point where you think, actually, I'm part of a greedy business. I'm part of a greedy sector, and I don't need to be this greedy. So it comes from people themselves. You don't have to have a gas guzzling car. You can spend. People who, not everybody can afford an electric car, but a lot of people who can haven't got one. You can make. It's people who make these decisions. I've got an electric car. I'm not going to crow about it. And it's a pain in the backside, having to stop for 20 minutes. Not that I drive a lot. I'll prefer to use the train. But if I have to drive, and if I have to stop for 20 minutes, half an hour, I do get a little bit angry. But you've got to overcome that and think, actually, on the scale of things, missing that half an hour of getting somewhere, you do something with that half an hour. Do your emails, read a book, read the paper, relax. You have to make these decisions yourself. We need governments that start to use a stick a little bit more.
I mean, it almost sounds like if you're embarking on a purposeful adventure at the start, and you need investment and shareholders, you have to make sure that they are on board with your passion, your principles, your values, so that down the road you don't get caught in a kind of a spiral of having to make more money to satisfy all of the people that are involved in this pyramid scheme, for want of a better description.
Yeah, and you have to live those values as well, because there's too much greenwashing goes on. And the media are terrible at this. A fashion company or something will have a green initiative, and that gets all the publicity, and then the charity shops who are 100% green are criticized for being too many of them on our high street. The value sets of the media is pretty weak as well sometimes, and the lack of understanding.
I mean, my local town of Birkenhead has suffered substantially with the Marks and Spencers and the Debenhams and all leaving, and it is now all.
But is that suffering, or is that an opportunity? They've gone for a reason. They've gone businesses fail, especially large ones like that, because they had the clout. They had the clout to make change. I know Marks and Spencers haven't failed. They've just moved out of Birkenhead, but businesses have the clout of that scale, have the clout to make change, and they failed. They failed to make the changes that the public would support them in. and therefore that's released. You know, when I moved to London in 1979, London had lost 2.5 million. It was at just short of 10 million population in the 50s and the 60s. It had built back from the war years and everything, and it reduced. 2.5 million people moved out of London. There were empty shops everywhere. We were able to rent shops in Covent Garden for £60 a week, in Soho for £20 a week. The opportunity was there, and young people took that and built London into, you know, London's back up to 10 million. But now there are opportunities again, and that's what I see in places like Birkenhead and all around the country. At the moment, I just see it. This is a time of opportunity. It's not a time to bury your head in the sand. You know, when businesses fail, it creates space for new businesses to prosper. And at the moment, you know, one way of prospering is to be truly purposeful, because there is a significant market out there for it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's really, really profound, Wayne. Finally, then, what's next for you? What's next? You know, what are the big issues on the horizon?
Well, we've been working on this thing called the Good Business Festival, which is actually based in Liverpool, and we've been trying to do a physical iteration of it, because I really believe that the best business is done when people get face to face, because you know, like after we've done this, screen goes off. I'm here, but I'm not mixing with people we can't have that discussion afterwards. This week I was at the 10th anniversary of Media City in where the BBC are in Salford, and ITV and all of that lot, and it was a physical get together. There was hundreds of us, and what was achieved for the next 10 years in half an hour in that room afterwards was phenomenal. Mm-hmm. You know, so what's next is to try and get this Good Business Festival, which is supposed to be the world's event for purposeful, you know, with a slogan, profit comes from purpose, to get people together in Liverpool in March. So if anybody wants to find out more about that, go on to the Good Business Festival website. We've had 2 attempts. We had to do one digitally, and then we were doing one physically, and Liverpool went into its second lockdown, and we had to. So, but both of them we've had to shift around. But this time we're going to deliver it in March, all being well. Other things that we're doing, we've got lots of urban design and coastal regeneration projects on. Lots of placemaking events. We're working all around the country, and yeah, just want to keep doing stuff that has an impact, really.
Okay. Wayne, thank you so much for your time this morning. It has been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and I'm certain that we at the ABP would be really interested to find out more about this festival in Liverpool, and see if we can communicate some of that information to our membership.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Like a really fascinating opportunity. And being down the road, I'll make sure that I'm there. Okay. Thank you, Wayne.
Okay, yeah, cheers. Bye.